let's get this going in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Scott M. Graves, founder of M the Media Project and founder of SM Graves Associates.
Hi, I'm Scott J. Graves, longtime City of Gardner City Councilor and non-politician.
And you are listening to Scott's on the Rocks Politica podcast. And we welcome you to episode 5, an episode which I was thinking about what our title should be, Scott. And I think our episode should be entitled, What, Where? And I say that in the style of Vinnie Barbarino. Welcome back, Cotter.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like I had a lot of good ideas. We'll see. Because I feel like we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been missing in all of our stuff. We're going to actually start with local politics tonight, too, which I think will be exciting for all of our viewers and listeners. Yeah. So I like your idea. We were just talking off air for a couple of minutes preparing. So we have a property here in town. What is the address? Do you remember the address of the property that
I think it's 525 Parker Street. Let me see. But everybody knows where it is. It's on the way to Dugay's Chicken. If you're heading toward Dugay's from downtown Gardner, on the right before the low railroad bridge, there's a piece of property on the right, which is on Parker's Pond, and that's the property we're talking about.
So we're starting off hyper local tonight, ladies and gentlemen, for a property that a apartment complex has been proposed. Now, if we go back to the very beginning, and by the way, our discussion is really going to focus not on the political ramifications of this, but really on planning, good and bad decisions made in urban planning, and a lot of the main elements that really point to what the future will or could look like for our city. And it's really representative for those of you listening who are not from Gardner or the North Central Massachusetts region. You've heard these same kinds of arguments back and forth for developments of your mill town as well. So you'll probably get something good out of it. So if we go back to the beginning of this whole development process, these are supposed to be condos.
I think the original plan was to build some condos there, correct?
And now we're looking at something that's a little more diverse. And I don't know if that's the right terminology, but yeah, a little more diverse.
The plan now is to have 123 dwelling unit development, 123 living units, which would be multifamily housing.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I think it's going to be apartments.
Well, I can't. Don't quote me on where I heard that or read that over these many months, but I believe it's part of at least one iteration of the set of basic drawings and plans that were proposed at one of the many meetings that public hearings that they've had on this subject. I happen to live in Ward, which is the ward in which this property would be. Yeah. And generally speaking, I'm a proponent of it.
So just so everybody knows, the reason why we're not really sure exactly what's going to go in there as far as specifics goes is because this hasn't even gone off the ground yet. And that's why the city council's meeting on it. Because it's an industrial zoned property, there used to be a furniture shop there, a furniture manufacturing plant there. Gem Industries had a satellite there, or some kind of unit of Gem Industries was there for a long time. The owner torn that down, the industrial building, I don't know, about 15, 20 years ago, and it's been empty ever since, been completely empty ever since. So this was, I think, around 2005, 2006, and then the economy went south right around that time. That's when what do they call it? The Great Recession. So it kind of took that hit and stayed dormant and empty there since then. So it's still zoned industrial. So in order to put residences in there, what they need from the city council is for us to pass what's called an overlay district. And that means that if we pass this, if the city council agrees to pass it, if they get 6 votes from the city council out of the 11 of us, it'll pass, the overlay will pass, which means that they will now be able to put some type of residential development there. Now, that means they still have to go to the building department. They're still going to have to go to get a special permit at the planning board. They're probably going to have to go to the ZBA. They're going to have to deal with Conservation Commission because it's on Parker's Pond. So some of the residents might get upset at first to say, whoa, what's going on there? But it's so early in this is the absolute, this is even not even the beginning. Usually you don't even have to have this step in the process, because usually you pick out a spot.
This is the preface.
Exactly.
It's the preface to the beginning.
Exactly.
It's like when you buy a book and it has a dust jacket. This is on the outside of the bag. This isn't on the dust jacket.
That's a great analogy.
You can't even open the book.
You know, sometimes you buy a book and there's a preface and an introduction. This is like a preface to the preface.
This is a quote on the outside. Yeah. So and the reason why Scott and I are going out of our way to do this is because this will be the first. You know that this will be the first episode that hits 10,000 downloads, and everyone's gonna be up there. Like, oh my God, they're building 500. So now, in all seriousness, I want to talk for a moment about urban planning from this standpoint. We suffer, and we're not so unusual in this regard. We suffer from a lot of the right kind of housing, what might be called transitional housing, to retain or attract a new younger people, people that are just out of school or maybe a few years out of school, or people who, went through vocational training and are now, wanting to start off life. We don't have the kind of housing for these folks to come to our town. Now, even a relatively impoverished community like Gardner, if you look at a 2-3 bedroom home here, because housing prices have been going up, largely because for the last 10 years, they had nowhere to go but up. And that's been a good thing for all of us that own homes here. But at somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 or more, it's a lot of commitment for somebody fresh, starting their new life, wanting to buy. It's a commitment for a first-time home buyer for a number of reasons, including financial, too big to make. We need the kind of housing for people to come here, to live and work here, and we just don't have enough of that kind of housing. We have virtually none of it. And depending on the final design of this place, to me, it seems to have enough potential to be handy to us as a community from a planning standpoint in this regard. And therefore I say, especially at this early, preface before the introduction stage, it's worth continuing the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you in that. And I think you said it before. It might have been prior to actually going live, but the young people that go to college, either at Mount Wachusett Community College or Fitchburg State, who happen to be from here or around Gardner, might like to stay around for a little while. And there's literally not any transitional housing, as you said, for them. A lot of these, they're semi-professional people, or they're just out of college and they're into their first job where they're not making a ton of money, but they're on their way to be, the type of citizen that we want here. And they might not want to go in a triple decker, in a certain area of town that's not conducive to their lifestyles or whatever. And something like this would be absolutely perfect for them, it seems to me. Again, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like or what the specifics of it is going to be, but that could be a type of place where it could attract young people like that.
I have seen in the public comments section, otherwise known as the book, the infamous Facebook, but not just there. There's been a few public hearings and people Vaz book, but there have been some reactions at some of the public hearings on this matter here in Ward 3. Some people are really, really hyper concerned about traffic. I just don't see it. And I say that because while I do not live along that stretch of 2A, I just can't imagine that there's so much traffic there right now going between the metropolis of East Templeton and Gardner. I mean, other than the people flying into Duguay's roughly between the hours of 4 to 6 virtually every evening.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that there's so much traffic that we got to be worried about 123 units or so or thereabouts of apartments or condos or some type of housing being in that complex. Because correct me if I'm wrong, when people live in a place like that, they don't all generally leave or come back all at the same time.
Except I think one of the residents, I think it was, and maybe two of the residents had a pretty valid concern. Well, not pretty. It's, who am I to say? It's a valid concern because anybody's concern is valid. But it was that if there's 123 units, just say, you know, half of them work. So 123 units, just say one person lives in each unit, which is never going to happen. But just, you know, for purposes of our argument, one person lives in each unit. So that's 123 people leaving for work in the morning at the same time. But let's say half of them work. You're still talking about 60, 65 people all leaving at the same time in the morning. That could generate quite a bit of traffic. And that's just if we use the minimum
most
number.
households will have 2 cars, 2 people working.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying too? Like most, a good number of them will have at least 2 people with cars working, that kind of thing. So it doubles up.
It could be pretty busy in the morning and then coming home at night. But here's the way I approach these things as a city council a lot of times. This has to go to the planning board, and the planning board's there to say, okay, look, they're there to really push the issue of traffic, for instance. And if there's going to be any congestions or any problems, they'll put conditions in a special permit, as we know. Maybe they'll reduce the amount of units. I mean, that's all controlled downstream, if you will. We're just here to say, okay, you can go for it. If we do the overlay, if we give them the overlay, that means that they can at least go forward and see if they can get something to happen at the other boards. You know, planning board, conservation, building department, all that stuff, you know. So it's not really for us, although we look at all the factors, and traffic's one of them. We listen and we think about it. And if we think it would be a complete disaster, we don't have to vote for the overlay. But I kind of try to rely on the experts downstream, if you will, or upstream. Like the planning board, you get experts over there. The engineers department's going to weigh in. The DPW is going to weigh in. I mean, you got professionals that this is what they do for a living, right?